When we speak about Red Dead Redemption, we often talk about John Marston, the old outlaw turned bounty hunter being forced to take down the remnants of his old gang in order to secure his family's freedom and be redeemed within the eyes of the law. We often talk about the multitude of side characters that we meet, from Seth to Nigel West Dickens to Bonnie MacFarlane and the omnipotent and somewhat supernatural mysterious man. We talk about the game's mechanics, we talk about the world and its themes on futility, manifest destiny, and the distinction between an innocent and a savage. But there's that word, innocent. Throughout Red Dead Redemption, we're made to think on a few ideas. What is the difference between an innocent and a savage? How do you make the distinction between a loving act and a hateful one? And the difference between civilization and civility? While in my previous video I go over these themes and ideas in detail, there is one aspect about this that I want to dive deeper on, and that's the death of innocence, especially within the case of Jack Marston and the cycle of violence that permeates from that. So in this video, I'll be going over exactly why the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption is so tragic, and what this means not only for Jack Marston, but on the idea of innocence and savagery, and whether a distinction can be made by this. This is going to be a spoiler heavy video yet again, so a spoiler warning is in effect not just for Red Dead Redemption 1, but its sequel / prequel Red Dead Redemption 2. With all of that being said, I do hope that you enjoyed the video. To do this video justice, we need to go back, or forward depending on your view of progression, to the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. Set within the year of 1899, we see the Van der Linde gang moments before its downfall. Whilst going over the themes of Red Dead Redemption 2 would be its own can of worms and a whole other video, I do need to go over Jack Marston. In this game, he's just a little kid, a 4-year-old boy. He is the embodiment of innocence, yet he lives within a gang of outlaws. He loves his mum, Abigail. He loves Uncle Bill, Uncle Dutch. He loves everybody within the gang. The lengths the gang will go to in order to ensure that boy's safety goes above and beyond. When he's kidnapped by Angelo Bronte, the gang raised the plantation of the lady who organised the kidnapping, and they murdered everybody in sight, threatened her until she gave up any information, and promptly burned the mansion down. The gang is at their scariest here simply because they kidnapped this innocent little boy. One of the earliest missions in the game requires us to take Jack on a fishing trip to keep him company, and whilst Arthur is trying to teach him, he's busy making his mum a flower necklace because he hopes that she'll like it. He has nothing but love and purity in his heart. Even when kidnapped, he's happy and open to learning. Even starts calling his kidnapper Papa Bronte, much to John's distaste. It just goes to show how innocent this boy is. He doesn't know any better. He grew up in a gang of outlaws filled with criminal activity and violence, yet he was the sweetest and most innocent of them all, and he brought that out of everyone who spoke to him, even Arthur Morgan showing his softer side. So when we cut to Red Dead Redemption, it only makes the change that much sadder. During the final moments within Red Dead Redemption, after we have successfully taken out the last remaining members of the Van der Linde gang, we are finally reunited. Jack has changed. He's still that innocent man at heart, but there's a slight coldness to him. He's obsessed with books, with learning, and has aspirations of even becoming a government man. He even jokes about being an outlaw with his father, who comes home to his mother every day. He's got his head up in the clouds, but he's good at heart. He's still innocent, but this time he knows. He knows what's happened. He knows what the gang was like, how violent it was. He knows they were criminals. Yet when he asks John about it, he still calls them Uncle Dutch and Uncle Bill because despite everything that had happened, he still loves them, still cares about them. And John chooses to keep the knowledge of what he had to do hidden from him in order to protect him and in order to preserve that innocence that he has and to help him become a better man than he is. To grow up educated, prosperous, with a farm, earning an honest day pay for an honest day's work. A good man, civilized, not a murderer or an outlaw. Sure, John and Abigail may be keeping things from him, pretending like those things didn't happen, but it's out of wanting a better life for their son. But he knows, and deep down they know that he knows. He's seen things no other boy should see, yet he's still innocent and full of love, but that quickly gets ripped away from him in the final moments of the game, and his eventual change from an innocent into a savage truly begins. On that fateful day, Jack Marston is sanding down a block of wood in the barn, talking to his father about the farm and the future. They talk about airplanes and how they're going to be doing demonstrations soon. It's hopeful. a sign of better things to come, civilization's coming in, and it is, just not in the way that anybody expected. The cavalry is coming, the FBI and the American army is storming Beecher's Hope. John knows that this is going to be a bloodbath, and his main priority is keeping Jack and his wife Abigail safe. Uncle and John hold them off as best as they can before they have to fall back to the house. Jack, who up to this point has been desperately trying to prove himself to his father to show that he's a man now and can handle himself, just so that he won't leave again, takes up a gun in order to help defend his family, his home. This moment is interesting because we start to see how, despite being innocent, we can quickly begin to become a savage and do something barbaric like kill a man in order to protect what he loves, such as his family in this case. Jack is still just a kid in this, 16 or so years old, and already he's ready and willing to do something so uncivilized in order to protect his family. He starts to lose his innocence, both as a man but as a concept within society. By picking up a gun and fighting the army, the government, he's no longer an innocent in their eyes, but an accomplice, another member of the Vanderlyn gang ready to be taken out. In these brief moments, Jack sees Uncle get shot and die right in front of him, a man he's known since birth, by the very people he thought he might grow up to become one day, a man that he loved. The horrors of life hitting him straight on. In this moment, he's lost the innocence of youth, for he's now witnessed murder, death, right in front of him. The illusion of a normal life for the Marston family is shattered and the reality has set in. He's lost yet another form of innocence, naivety. John ends up sending Jack and Abigail away from the homestead on horseback, away from the violence and bloodshed so they can be spared and won't be harassed by the FBI anymore. With John's death, it might finally bring his family peace, a chance to live a normal life, even if that means it wouldn't be with him. In that moment, John redeems himself, but this video isn't about John, it's about Jack. And it was these very series of events which end up corrupting Jack and turning him into the very thing the government feared, the life his family hoped he wouldn't fall into, an outlaw and a killer. Jack ends up burying his father and uncle, two men he loved dearly. He had to witness the bloody mess of his father's body left out in the sun like roadkill, knowing it was the government's fault. And a few years later he loses his mother too, to what we don't know. But that leaves Jack Marston all alone, filled with an unquenchable layer of anger and rage. With nobody to guide him from right and wrong, government had failed him. His family were taken from him, both the family he had with the Vanderlyn gang and his paternal family. All he had left was his father's old gun belt, maybe his old Uncle Arthur's jacket too, and a seething hunger to avenge his family for what happened, to hunt down Edgar Ross and make him pay. It's beautifully poetic. This story started with a fishing trip, and it ended with a fishing trip too. Jack goes all over the states and into Mexico to hunt down Edgar Ross, and after a brief confrontation, it's ended with a round of bullets placed deep into the skull of the man who ruined his life. He went into this knowing what he was going to do. He'd lost everybody and everything. There's nothing left to lose. The only thing left to gain is the satisfaction of ending this once and for all. Either Edgar dies or he dies. But he wins. There's no vast spectacle, no adoring crowd, nothing like that. Just one man and his gun versus another man and his gun. Edgar Ross stated to John whilst on the hunt for Dutch that they wanted John to kill Dutch, otherwise they feared it would turn Dutch into a martyr if they did it. Yet when it came to John, they turned him into a martyr because it was the government and all of its beautiful, hypocritical, civilized ways that arrived to put him down. It wasn't another criminal, it was the government sending a message and creating the event which caused Jack to lose his innocence and embrace becoming the monster that society feared. After all is said and done, Jack just looks at the gun, nothing is spoken, but his attitude and the way he looks at the gun says more than enough. The reality of the situation has kicked in. He knows what he's done and the price he must no doubt pay. His fate has been decided, and in a horrible way, everything that his family died for has been in vain. It was all futile. John's death and sacrifice had been for nothing. Arthur's death and sacrifice had been for nothing. Arthur told John during the end of chapter 6 of Red Dead Redemption 2 to run and not look back. That revenge was a fool's game. During the epilogue of that game, John goes against this advice and goes after Micah Bell to avenge Arthur and the gang. Because if it wasn't for Arthur, this life was all for nothing, and he ends up damning him and his family in the process. It's no wonder then that when John dies, Jack does the exact same thing. He had nobody to tell him not to lust after revenge. to let it go and live peacefully. This wasn't planned for, this wasn't expected. As far as everybody was concerned, it was over and they could have a peaceful life. But Jack doesn't get that lesson, that message, and in that respect, Jack is more like his father than anybody could see coming, for the sins of the father will be passed on to the son. So what is innocence? How can we quantify it? What definitions are we using here to define what makes someone an innocent? Well, in this video, I'd like to say all of them, and all of them were ripped from him in such a short amount of time. There's innocence when it comes to naivety, but it's shown that Jack Marston lost that shortly before the events of Red Dead Redemption 1, because he knows how things were like back in the old gang. He had freedom from guilt or sin despite being acquainted with evil with the Van der Linde gang, because he was only a child, but by the events of Red Dead Redemption 1 that is no longer the case. He loses his innocence when he picks up his gun and defends the family ranch from the US government, ready to kill someone to protect what he loves, losing his innocence from a religious and moral standpoint, but also the innocence of youth, violence being barbaric and savage, so willingly picking up and going through with committing something as horrific as murder to protect the ones he loves, causes him to lose his innocence from that perspective. He is no longer a child, he is a man, and he will be judged and tried for his actions as one. And finally, he loses his innocence from society when he hunts down Edgar Ross and kills him for revenge for what he did to not only his father, but the Van der Linde gang as a whole. In that moment, he becomes a savage, a criminal, an outlaw, ostracized by civilized society, a broken kid forced into doing something extreme to get justice, to become the very thing his family and maybe the Van der Linde gang as a whole never wanted from him. What is the difference between an innocent and a savage? The truth is there isn't any. There's no difference between an outlaw and a government agent. Everyone, even the sweetest of souls on earth, can be driven to commit great crimes under the right circumstances, whether it's out of love or the justification of a paycheck. There's no such thing as civilized. There's no such thing as taming the Wild West. Call it whatever you like, it's always going to remain, and good people will always embrace the darkness. It just takes one bad day, and that's why I believe that Jack Marston is one of the greatest tragedies within the world of Red Dead Redemption, and how he perfectly showcases the death of innocence. Thank you so much for watching.